Some of these questions are interesting. But Father Palma's in the chat. Okay, well, welcome to our first ever Institute and Thesis Q&A. I'm Stephen Heiner, and with us in a snowstorm is His Excellency Bishop Donald Sanborn. Hello, Your Excellency.
Hello, Stephen.
I have to take responsibility for the stream starting late because there was a big snowstorm going on outside, and I was stuck in the road behind a horse and buggy in the snow. In my many years of driving, Your Excellency, I've never had to deal with that before.
Well, it's very traditional, horse and buggy.
There's a lot of Amish in this area, Pennsylvania Dutch, and they're not afraid to take their horse and buggy out in the snow.
No. By the way, Pennsylvania Dutch are not the Amish.
Oh, it's not.
No, they are not the same.
They're
too different, but that's not our problem today.
So Pennsylvania Dutch are...
They are the Germans who settled actually a little north of here.
So they're not Dutch.
They're Deutsch. They're Deutsch. It's the Pennsylvania Deutsch. You see,
Deutsch.
but then it got anglicized to Dutch. Yes, but the Amish or Amish, however you want to pronounce it, are people more to the south, but there's some up here too. And they are, the strict observance in the horse and buggies, but not the Pennsylvania Dutch. They have cars and everything else.
Well, listeners, you tuned in for Thesis Q&A, and you're getting some Dutch Q&A as well. I'm happy to have learned something.
Yes.
Your Excellency, before we start accepting questions, and I want to remind our listeners, those who are getting put in super chats will have their questions answered first, and I know that we have one already, and I will get to that. But I wanted to start with one that was put into a YouTube channel and that was asking about the confirmations from the schismatics and whether the Institute conditionally repeats these. And I thought it would be helpful to first explain that priests, whether Eastern Rite Catholic or Roman Catholic, can perform confirmations under certain circumstances. And what are those circumstances, Your Excellency?
Well, there's many things to distinguish here. There are the Eastern rites as they are in the Eastern countries, like Greece and the Middle East, etc. Then there's the Eastern rites as they are in Roman Rite countries. And it is certain that the Eastern rites in the Eastern countries, their priests can validly administer confirmation, which they commonly do at baptism. We do not know, and I did my best to look it up, but we do not know if that was the practice of the Eastern Rite priests in this country. In other words, did they have permission from the Vatican to do that? And I just don't know. So that's in that lack of knowledge. I just said, because we don't know, that we'll redo it.
Because conditionally, there's no harm there.
There's no harm if there's any kind of significant doubt. So I just don't know what their practices were. I don't even know how to look it up. If they had you see, Roman Rite priests need an indult from the Pope in order to be able to validly confirm.
Which they most often did in missionary countries, probably.
It was commonly given, but it was specified that if they don't have the indult, it is invalid. You see, a papal indult. So I don't know if that sort of situation was the same here, that they needed an indult. I just don't know. So that's why we put that in the pastoral directory that will just redo those. You see.
And I think, to your point, Your Excellency, about how things are different, one thing that people should know that argues in favor of His Excellency's prudence in this matter is that in the Byzantine Rite priests are outside of the United States permitted to be married, obviously before they enter major orders. In the United States, they are specifically prohibited from doing so because it would cause too much friction. And I think the Roman Rite bishops thought, well, we don't want to, lose clergy to the competition, shall we say?
No. The Roman Rite bishops in the 19th century had made a very, very strong objection to their being married in this country.
So I hope that clarifies the question from someone who'd put that on YouTube earlier this week. We can't respond to every question on YouTube, but we do our best, especially when they are presented in a respectful tone. So our first super chat today comes from Dump Vatican II Embrace Tradition. I suppose you like that handle.
That'd make a good bumper sticker. Yeah.
How do traditionalist clergy act as ministers of the church if they've neither been sent by the Pope nor Christ, the latter supposing they're working of miracles?
Well, let's take the first part. I have explained this at other times, is that in the lack of authority, the complete lack of the bishop and of the Pope, we rely on the principle of epikeia, which is the favorable interpretation of the lawmaker's mind in his absence. An example is a Dominican novice who sees a book in a bookstore that he really needs, but he can't contact his novice master to get permission. So he buys the book on the principle of epikeia, that the novice master would want him to have that. You see, so that's epikeia. And so the question is, would Christ, as head of the church, want us, for faithful priests, traditional priests who adhere to the true dogmas of the Catholic Church, to administer sacraments, the Mass and sacraments, to the faithful? Would he want that? One of the mottos of the Catholic Church is that the supreme law is the salvation of souls. So if that's true, if that's the supreme law, then we could say certainly that Christ would want us to do this. The alternative is to say, well, we'll close the door. We priests will stay in the rectory.
Say private masses
for ourselves, and you can say your rosaries, but we won't bless them. Because we won't do any priestly function. Those are the two possibilities. And the second seems to me absurd and pharisaical.
It seems to go counter to examples of people being in Scripture that are wounded, that our Lord says, get up and walk. He doesn't say, well, you don't have jurisdiction, so you're going to have to sit there.
Well, I don't know if that's a really good analogy, but
But I'm trying to tie on to your common sense, Your Excellency, the fact that what would our Lord ask us to do in this circumstance? And yes. I don't think that being locked up in the seminary is a...
No, or where priests just slam the door to the lay people who are begging for the Mass. Is that... I mean, that's pharisaical. That's where the law becomes a burden upon the people. And the law is made for the salvation of souls. It's not made for itself. It's not as if, it's the old law that had to be observed. And our Lord excoriated the Pharisees for their observances. He said that the Sabbath is made for man and not man for the Sabbath.
We have another super chat from Andrew McFarland for $20. Thank you for your contribution, Andrew. Please feel free to ask a question. I'll answer it. You didn't put one in there. We have another super chat from Frankie Logue, €5, because Frankie's in an EU country now. He's not at home. How should one regard and interact with those who, having once held a thesis or having been Sedevacantists, have now returned to the Novus Ordo or Indult, or I suppose, or worse?
Well, I think that we live in a very, let's say, confusing time. I don't think we can, again, it depends on whether they have defected from the faith. There's a number of questions here. If they have defected from the faith, or if they have defected from the thesis, or if they have defected from tradition or some form of tradition. There's a lot of nuances here. If someone has defected from the faith, I think that you should avoid them. They should not be among your friends, unless you have some serious reason to be with them or to talk to them.
And this means they've not taken fraternal correction, and then you would avoid them.
Yes.
If it was appropriate for you to fraternally correct them.
But I would say in all of the shades of tradition, etc., this is a very confusing time, and it is hard for people to figure out the right path. I myself had, let's call it an evolution along the way. You discover things as you go, and I don't think we should be, how would you say, excessively strict on that, because we don't have the authority of the church. We cannot impose our ideas on anybody. We can just propose them. You see, so that's what I would answer.
All right. Well, I think you had alluded to it's the difference between defecting from the faith or defecting from the thesis. Defecting from the thesis is not a reason to avoid somebody.
It's a theological conclusion, which is an explanation of what is going on with regard to the authority of the church at the present time. I would say it's certain. In other words, it's a certain theological conclusion, but that's very, very distant from being a dogma. You see, so that's two different things. So, it's just an explanation which, if you understand, you should embrace. But if not, I'm not going to excommunicate you because I don't have any power to do so anyway.
and as you say, it's just a method of coming to a solution. And I think that's potentially a weakness. For myself, Your Excellency, I told you I didn't even know about the thesis until I moved to Europe, where it is a pretty big deal.
Oh, yes.
And then I was, let's say, opinionist on it. It's still this idea of an opinion, but I think I thought of it originally as a way to solve a problem in the future, as opposed to also being a way to understand how is the church functioning right now. Mm-hmm. The thesis gives the answer to that as well.
Yes. So it's I would call it a certain theological conclusion, but others might draw different conclusions.
We have a super chat from Tom Mastroianni for 1999. Thank you, Tom. I hope you are staying safe on the roads.
What about that extra penny? The 1999.
He's holding it to put it to the collection. To put it to the collection tomorrow. So Tom's question is: have any pre-Vatican II theologians and doctors of the Church ever contemplated the situation in which we presently find ourselves, namely the imposition of a false religion by those claiming authority?
Well, none has foreseen exactly what we have. St. Jerome said that the abomination of desolation is false doctrines inside the church. So that's he's end of the 4th century saying that. So there are authors that describe, Father Berry, I forget his first name. Sylvester Berry, talking about a false pope, a period of a false pope. There are elements, you might say, where the great apostasy from the faith, St. Paul, there are various elements, but they're all together right now. You have the great apostasy from the faith. I'm sure we're in that now. But also you have the false pope problem. You have false doctrines inside the church. This St. Gregory mentioned, and I just can't remember exactly what he said, but I have it in my notes. St. Gregory the Great mentioned something that pertains to this period. But to describe exactly what we're going through, no, nobody had never dreamt that we would see this.
You mentioned the Great Apostasy, Your Excellency. We've talked about this before, about how sometimes people use private revelation or eschatology to then determine their theological positions. And the most famous being, well, Our Lady said at Fatima that the Pope has to consecrate Russia to the Immaculate Heart. We have to have a Pope in order to do that. Therefore, Sedevacantism is invalid, right? This sort of reasoning. And so one of the questions that has come into us from the Contact Us forum at the seminary a couple times actually has been due to remarks that you made at a Fresno conference in 2016 about the gospel having been preached to the whole world. And there's two parts to my question. Well, I suppose one statement is the person said, well, that the great apostasy can't happen because the gospel hasn't been preached to the whole world. And my first thought was, how, if this isn't the great apostasy, what is the great apostasy going to look like? And then they questioned, well, how does His Excellency know that the gospel is preached to the whole world?
Well, to do number two first, it has. That's just a verification of what has been done in the past. It was accomplished under Pius XI. Does that mean that every island off of Antarctica has a church? No, it means it's in a moral sense that it has been spread everywhere, especially with modern communications, etc. It has been preached and taught everywhere in the whole inhabited world. It's just a fact. I mean,
people wanted some kind of chapter and verse from you that there was a declaration from the Holy Office on this date, etc.
No, it's a question of a moral totality, not an absolute totality.
With technology, with radio, with ships, with transportation.
Yes. Everybody knows about the Catholic Church. The mission. There was a tremendous missionary activity during the 19th century and early 20th century. Enormous. In all of those empires, etc., where the Europeans went, enormous missionary activity, and that brought it to Africa and all of these lands. Now, are there tribes in the Amazon of Brazil that never heard of Christianity? Perhaps, but as I said, it's a moral totality. Before Columbus and all, the New World had not been discovered, or only perhaps very lightly, you might say. So, I mean, there was two continents that never heard of Christianity. See, so that was certainly not the time of this moral totality. Various other parts of the world, Saint Francis Xavier went to India, etc. But what was the first part of the question? How do we? Oh, yes, there. Well, the Council of
the gospel must be preached everywhere.
There are three things: that the gospel has to be preached everywhere, the great apostasy, and the coming of the Antichrist are the three things that will precede the end of the world. They don't mention the order of those things. The Council, it's just those are three things that have to happen. But it would seem that the great apostasy would come. It seems correct that it would come after the preaching of the gospel to the whole world. In other words, that all of the Gentiles have heard the gospel, and then will come this apostasy of the Gentiles.
That's interesting.
And don't forget, there's another element which the Catechism of the Council of Trent did not say, but St. Paul says, the conversion of the Jews before the end of the world. So that's actually another element. So we're still a long way out from the end of the world, because the conversion of the Jews does not seem to be happening tomorrow. So I wouldn't get to.
So there's two elements to that. One is those are not chronologically listed, so it is very possible. So even if people say Bishop Sanborn's wrong, the gospel has been preached anywhere, it is still possible that the great apostasy could be happening before that. And
this is not the great apostasy. Well,
I don't want to be here when.
I don't want to. Yes.
For those of you who, His Excellency has a sermon that he did for Christmas Day, and when His Excellency is in this format, he's a bit more jovial, but when he gives sermons, he does not joke around. And when he was giving the sermon, he had mentioned about the way the world is going, and he says, I'm glad that I won't be here to see what happens in 10, 20, 30 years.
Yes, I mean, there is a consolation in being in old age, because the way the world is going today, I don't want to be around for it, frankly, and I feel sorry for the young people.
Jessica Wood, $9.99. Thank you for the super chat, Jessica. Jessica's question: can His Excellency comment on the rumor of Archbishop Vigano's supposed conditional ordination by Bishop Williamson?
No, because I don't know any more than you do. That's my answer to the question. I just heard that it's a rumor, but I don't know anything.
So the follow-up might be, what would be the situation for someone who is a bishop or a priest? Is it normal to publicize a conditional consecration or ordination, especially if you are in a high office?
Yes, your ordination, all of your sacred orders are public knowledge. Just as when you go into a doctor's office, he has all of his degrees, etc., on the wall. It's public knowledge where you've been, where you got your degrees from, and who has given you a license to practice. If somebody is secretive about where they were ordained or by whom, etc., that is a very bad sign, very bad, because that means they have something to hide. And people have a right to know all of those things about their priest, just as you have a right to know about your doctor. You see,
Could Archbishop Vigano give any morally valid reason for why he would keep that secret?
I don't know. I mean, he's a mystery anyway. In other words, apart from that question, he is a mysterious person who gives all the logic of one thing and never draws the conclusion. I really don't know how to read him. I really don't know what to say about him.
On the other hand, Bishop Williamson, who, as you know, he writes a weekly column, if it were to be denied, I think he would deny it.
I don't know. We're dealing with
right, speculation. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Seth Coatney, $5. Thank you for the donation, Seth. Will there be any articles or responses made to the objections to the thesis by the WM Review or Griff Ruby? Thank you, and God bless the RCI.
Well, I think that we have said on the thesis website just about everything that we can say about the thesis. It has been thoroughly researched, and I think we have responded to all of the objections. There's not really much else to say, and many times people object to it because they don't understand it. See, so but I don't know of those objections that he's referring to.
Okay. Well, and I would just tell you, Seth, the website has been up for some time now. If you haven't gone, you can go to thethesis.us, and the majority of the chapters are up. Some are continuing to be proofread and checked. You've got to make sure all your footnotes are correct. But we'll have another chapter actually being added later this month on religious liberty. But it'll by and by, the people working on it all have jobs, whether that's working in the seminary or working in a parish. And so this is a project that they're doing. I remember remarking to you, Your Excellency, how astonishing it was to me. I didn't realize until recently that St. Augustine was a working ordinary. In my mind, okay, he's a bishop, he's a doctor of the church, but he ran a regular diocese like everyone else. And then at night, his side project was working on De Trinitate.
Well, go downstairs and look at our library and his Opera Omnia. I mean, he wrote, I don't know how he ever did it. He didn't have a computer, obviously, and there was no cut and paste.
He puts us to shame for sure.
Yes.
We have a super chat from Xavier Park, the Cuban. Is it the Cuban Buddhist? Is that what that says, Father Disposito? For $1.99. He says, I don't believe. I go to Mass to avoid hell. Help.
Well, he needs to pray to God for the grace of enlightenment, that he learn and understand the truths of the faith. If you go to God with a sincere heart in prayer to have the truth be made known to you, he will infallibly answer your prayer. He will open the proper doors for you. He will inspire you, whatever he needs to do. But he will, if you ask him for bread, he will not hand you a snake.
And that, I suppose that prayer also has to be persevering, Your Excellency.
Persevering prayer and sincere, and ready to do whatever is necessary in order to embrace the true faith.
Andrew McFarland, again, another $20. Thank you, Andrew. Once we have a true pope, how will we know if any particular priest has been validly ordained?
Well, we just have to find out when and by whom they were ordained, etc., and what rite was used, and that would be a tremendous task, actually. But actually, there would be relatively few priests who would even qualify. When we consider the size of the Catholic Church, how many priests are there in the whole world who hold to the truths of the Catholic faith? And it's really relatively small. So I don't really see that as a problem. The bigger problem is getting a true pope. That is far a bigger problem. Putting the church back together, so to speak, or rectifying its problems, it would take time, but it's not impossible.
There's many, many questions. From Didymus, many SSPX trads claim that the question of Sedevacantism, while potentially true, is only for future popes and future councils to rule on. What is the proper response to this argument?
Well, again, you have to distinguish fact and law. That is key. Someone, to use an analogy, someone can murder somebody else, and in fact he is a murderer. No one would deny that. If he does it in front of many witnesses, he's certainly a murderer. In fact, but he's not a murderer before the law until he is convicted. So, yes, for someone to be declared a heretic before the law requires some judicial act of the church. That doesn't mean that you just say, well, this person is not a heretic. A perfect example is Nestorius. Nestorius pronounced on Christmas Day his heresy in 428, that Our Lady was not the true Mother of God. Most of his clergy abandoned him at that point. Some stayed with him because they were heretics, but they separated and they said, we have an emperor but no bishop. But then he was not condemned until and taken away from that see legally until 431. The same was true of Martin Luther. He became a heretic in 1517, but he was not condemned until 1521. So the legal pronouncement always lags behind the fact. So it takes time, it takes warnings, etc., etc. Now, also, I would say that we are not talking about the personal heresy of these popes or these Vatican II popes. We're talking about the fact that they have promulgated heresy to the church. So the question is not, how do we deal with their personal sin of heresy? We already know that it is impossible that they be popes because of the doctrine of the indefectibility of the church, that they are promulgating doctrines and practices which are sinful and false in the name of the church and the authority of the church. It is impossible that they be true popes because that means the church would have defected if we recognize them as true popes. So it's really a whole other argument. Now that the church would necessarily have to declare all of these things by some sort of legal process. But I would give this example. If you, we have to treat them as non-popes and non-bishops, even now, in the same way that the clergy of Constantinople treated the heretic Nestorius. All right. I would also say, if you knew that the man down the street was a child molester but was not convicted, would you send your children down to play? As you would treat him already as a child molester, even though he may not be convicted, he might even be acquitted. But there's fact and there's law. You see, it's key to understanding that.
Well, your child molester point is well put to the SSPX people. It shall be decided by a future pope and council. What are you doing in the meantime?
Yes.
You're setting up a parallel church with parallel annulments, with parallel schools, parallel seminaries.
Yes. You are defying the Roman pontiff, the person that you say is the Roman pontiff. That's not Catholic.
I wonder what a future pope or council will say about that.
That might be a very good question.
A while back, I had read in the newsletter after Father Guépin's passing that the RCI inherited a chapel in the Vendée. How are the plans to restore and use the chapel going?
Well, when you say the RCI, all of that belongs to the association, which is their word for a corporation, that Father Guépin founded. So it's not
Association St. Pius V.
Yes.
I think.
So I mean so our priests succeeded to that. You see, but it's operated by our priests. And yes, they found in his papers that there was a chapel in Vendée. I went to see it. It was overgrown, and the property was overgrown, but the building was in excellent condition, and they just needed to clean it up a little bit. But they are not sure. They want to do a mass in Vendée. but they're not exactly sure. They already have a mass in the southern part of Vendée, and they're now interested in getting a building for a school also north of where they're saying mass. So they would actually have 3 different possible locations. They're just not sure what to do right now. They have a lot on their plate, as they say.
It's true. So to clarify, mass is already being said in the Vendée. Actually, the bishop had a chance to visit where that mass is being said, and someone had noted, oh, there's an SSPX symbol on the wall, and it just shows you the SSPX have so co-opted the heart of the Vendée, that double heart of the Immaculate Heart and the Sacred Heart, that people think it's an SSPX symbol.
Yes, that is the symbol of the Vendée reaction to the French Revolution. Yes.
So there is already there, and His Excellency alluded to the fact that there might be more, but the apostolate in France is growing, like, as we would say in America, gangbusters.
Yes. I don't know how you say that in French. but no, they are very, very devout and active priests, very good priests, very prudent priests, and they are holding down a lot of jobs, many jobs, and they are training a Brazilian seminarian. They are Father Duterte's teaching in a school 2 days a week at least. They are saying mass in England. They are saying mass in Spain.
He's still a seminary professor.
Yes, he teaches dogma, very difficult dogma courses on Zoom to our seminarians. I mean, I really don't know how they do it. I don't know how they do it.
It's suspicion that they might be cyborgs here, Your Excellency.
Yes, whatever they are, but they're doing a great job.
So one of the earliest questions in the chat was, how can there still be apostolicity if the few valid Catholic bishops don't have authority to govern, and those elected to ecclesiastical offices are not able to exercise legitimately due to heresy?
Well, apostolicity depends primarily on the succession. Succession is what we call the material side of the church, and a church is a structure in the sense of a moral structure, just like a company, you might say, and there has to be a succession one after the other until the end of time, like a chain that is not broken. Just as kings succeed, in their dynasties, one to another. The dynasty is that of St. Peter, and the church has the ability to elect successors of St. Peter. That's why the cardinals are the Roman clergy. See, Rome is attached to St. Peter. That's why it's always Rome, you see. And so each of those cardinals has a church in Rome. They are the pastor of a church in Rome. That's very important. Before the College of Cardinals, it was the Roman clergy who would elect the Pope, you see. So the theologians say the church must always have the possibility of legally electing a pope. That is an absolute for the church. If it loses that possibility of legally electing a successor of St. Peter, then the church is defected. So the fact that they have jurisdiction or not, it doesn't affect directly the apostolicity. You can only receive jurisdiction if you have apostolic succession.
And I think also, too, there's a problem here with there being few valid Catholic bishops, that there's not a number of bishops that then gets you to a qualification of apostolicity. Like, well, we've hit 100, so that qualifies us for continuing apostolicity.
No, the whole, you might say, moral structure of the church must remain intact until the end of the world. See, it's moral structure is kind of a technical term, but it's institutional continuity. It's continuity as an institution, which requires that legal nomination and election of popes one after the other.
We have another super chat from someone named Contra Errores.
It's a good name.
Good name. Yeah. 10, is that reals, Father Disposito, you think? I don't know. All right. Well, thank you very much for the donation. Does some RCI member plan to respond to Alvaro Calderon's, that's Father Calderon's, objection to the thesis? He's an SSPX priest.
I don't know what his objection is.
I don't know either. I don't think at the moment there's any plan to respond to Father Calderon. No.
microphone, but
Yeah. Okay.
No, I just don't know what his objection is.
Okay. It is my understanding that the bishop requires clergy to hold to the thesis. Does he require this of parishioners as well?
No. No.
But both of those premises are wrong.
Well, I require the RCI clergy. In other words, if you join the RCI, the Roman Catholic Institute, yes, you must accept the thesis.
But that's less you requiring them than that's the rules of the institute that they have to join. I know. I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a legitimate thing to say. The reason for that is that we're not saying it's a dogma, but we're just saying for the unity of our organization, we don't want people arguing about it and factions. I am or I'm not. In other words, it's just a way of keeping the whole thing together. See, and so that's the reason for it. It's not, we're not making a dogma out of it. Parishioners, no. All we ask of parishioners is that they not two-time the traditional faith and the Novus Ordo faith, or religion, or whatever you want to call that thing. That they can't go back and forth. And that includes the unicum problem. Because if you're going to an unicum mass, even if it's traditional, you are identifying with the Novus Ordo. See, so that we impose, but we don't know. We don't. I mean, we might occasionally mention it in a sermon, but it really not much. I mean, it doesn't really.
It wasn't even on the radar of many parishioners until a few years ago. Your
Yeah,
Excellency.
no, it's really a sacerdotal thing among priests and religious.
So I think the other aspect is that you also work with clergy who don't hold the thesis or openly hold the thesis.
Yes, I mean, I don't go around with a thesis Geiger counter and do you hold it? No, it's a theological conclusion, and some have not drawn that conclusion yet, or maybe they never will. If they have the Catholic faith and they practice everything that is traditional about the Catholic faith, that's all I ask.
We have a follow-up from Dump Vatican II, Embrace Tradition. How can a reasonable presumption based on epikeia translate into being sent by Christ, since without working miracles, no one can prove they've been sent by Christ?
Well, first of all, miracles are something that need to be verified by the Catholic Church. So you can't even... that does not enter into any kind of discussion about having a mission from Christ. Only the Church can give you a mission. Working miracles cannot give you a mission, even in a normal time of the Church. It cannot give you a mission, even if you worked a certainly true miracle. It has nothing to do with it whatsoever. Should we shut the door, or what is the reasonable thing to do? We can claim to be sent in the acts that we perform. In other words, not jurisdictionally. That doesn't mean, to be sent means you have jurisdiction. We're not saying that. We're saying that we have a sacramental jurisdiction in the act of giving these sacraments. That is, in this case, Christ, as head of the Church, wants us to distribute these sacraments. But that doesn't mean we're like the bishop of the diocese who has control over all the sacraments in a territory. Nothing like that. It just means that when we are approached by the faithful, by charity, we give them sacraments in the Mass and everything they need for eternal salvation. So I think that the person asking the question is thinking that we have this permanent mission and universal mission from the Church to do this, and we don't. We have it, as we say in Latin, per modum actus, that is, in each individual case, according to a legitimate presumption and judgment that is based on epikeia.
Regarding defective intention as a cause for non-papacy, if a teacher accepted a teaching position with the main intention to abuse children, wouldn't he still be a valid teacher, but merely to be resisted?
Well, yes, valid teacher. I would fire him, but for other reasons. In other words, his evil intention with regard to the purity of the children is extrinsic to his teaching. He could be the greatest teacher in the world, you see, and he might teach the truth. See, so that's extrinsic. It's same thing if a pope were to let's say run around with women, but at the same time promulgated the truths of the Catholic faith and defended the Catholic faith. For that reason, he would not lose his authority. You see, he would be a bad pope. What would you call a bad pope? He has women there and everything. But his main function is to preserve and promote the Catholic faith. There have been popes like that in the past, that were not ideal from the point of view of their morals, but they never touched dogma. They never touched the liturgy of the church. They never did anything wrong. And that's one of the proofs of the indefectibility of the church, that even despite their bad morals and various other problems that they had, that they never messed the church up the way these modernists have.
Mm. Another question from Andrew McFarland. Again, thank you for the super chat, Andrew. Does MHT have its own liturgical calendar or liturgical calendar online?
Not online, I don't think so. We have an ordo, which is all in Latin, which probably a layperson would not understand. But we do have the seminary calendar, which has all of the liturgical feasts on it. And we could put it online. Yes.
Am I adding something to my to-do list here?
Well, that's Father Patrizio's to do. I don't even know where it is. Yes.
All right. So, Andrew, the question is possibly, and we'll see about that. So the answer is not a definite no. It's just that in the amount of things that have to be done, especially with classes starting again next week, it may not be at the top of the list, but I will certainly pass that on to Father Patrizzi. And here you're actually, as I anticipated, we're getting into these sorts of questions. Vincent Farrell, $9.99. Thank you, Vincent, for your contribution. Can you briefly explain the Missio cesio distinction with regard to the thesis?
Yes, cesio is what I just described a few minutes ago, and that is the corporate aspect of the hierarchy. And the Missio is the invisible mission or commission from Christ to teach, rule, and sanctify the church. So the mission, for example, if an ambassador is sent by the government, he has an authority to do certain things based on the fact that he is sent. If the government at home says you're no longer the ambassador, then he loses his mission and he can no longer negotiate peace treaties, etc. See, so that's when you're sent. You see, the very word apostle means sent from the Greek. That means you have authority from the person who has it by nature, which would be Christ. But the cesio means that you sit. Cesio means sitting. That means that you are legitimately in the position to receive authority, because authority cannot be given to someone who is not properly designated to receive it. See, it's like a glass and water. In other words, the water has to be poured into something. So cesio. So Bishop Gerard de Laurier said, really the term Sedevacantism is not correct because there is a chair and somebody's sitting in it, but he has no authority. You see, so the cesio is there, but the Missio is not there. So that's why the term Sedeprivationism is used. That is, that the person sitting in the chair is deprived of something he should have through his own fault, obviously, because of his evil intention.
Mm. We have another super chat from Jeremiah Alphonsus for $10. Thank you, Jeremiah. If you have a question, please feel free to share it, and we'll pose it to the bishop. In a non-unicum mass, what is said in the canon for the pope and bishop?
You just skip it. Unicum omnibus orthodoxis, etc.
Is it in parentheses inside the
No,
the
it's just if you look in the rubrics of the missal in the front, it tells you essentially to skip it.
Okay. We have someone giving some historical background for the confirmation question earlier. My mother was born in Palermo, Sicily, and baptized, received the Holy Eucharist, and confirmed all at the same time in 1909.
It's Pius X, yes.
But that doesn't answer the question for the United States.
No, and there probably were Eastern rites in Sicily. That used to be a Greek colony in the ancient world, and no, I just don't know what the rule was here. And if I can find out, if somebody can tell me how to find out. No, I'm not saying that it's doubt. I'm saying I don't know. And because I don't know, I would redo it. You see, but doubt means your mind cannot figure one way or the other what's true or false. You see, that's doubt. It's stuck.
So we can find some evidence to know, then we would be able to move forward on that.
Yes, it's just something that needs to be solved. But at the time that I wrote that, I mean, I tried everywhere to find that out. I just have no idea where to go for that.
But I suppose we didn't talk about that at the time, Your Excellency. As far as schismatics and Russian Orthodox go, there's no question about that.
Well, Greek schismatics, they are what you call Greek Orthodox. They are very careful about their rites. They, I don't see any reason to doubt the validity of their sacraments. They're very attached to their liturgical rites. However, the Russian seminarians that I had years ago told me, do not trust the sacraments of the Russian Orthodox because they were all they were all KGB agents. That's what they told me.
Oh, I think that's been well documented, Your Excellency.
Yeah.
I think the point that was made about confirmation specifically regarding the schismatics is that a priest can only ordinarily perform confirmations through some permission from, as you say in the Roman Rite, from the Pope. So since the schismatics don't have any jurisdiction, even ordinarily speaking, they can't give that kind of permission to a simple priest.
No, but they may have received it way back. In other words, it might be as a permission given to them, and I suspect that they'd have it. I do, but it may have been
conceded many centuries ago.
In other words, maybe they just brought that over, but I just don't know because of that thing about so they couldn't bring over their custom of getting married. See, did they bring over that other custom? I don't know. Again, I don't know.
Mike Henderson, $5. Thank you for the donation, Mike. I'm unclear about the so-called SSPX resistance. What exactly are they resisting, and are their masses safe to attend?
They are resisting the move that was made in 2012, or the, let's say, false move, we might say, because it never really happened. But in 2012, they seem to be on the verge of patching it up with the modernists in Rome. You see, it came very close, and Bishop Williamson reacted to that and said we have to resist this because this is against Archbishop Lefebvre's wish. He says that before Archbishop Lefebvre died, that he said to the leaders of the Fraternity of St. Pius X, no negotiations with Rome until they return to the faith. Now, I never saw that in print, but he said that, all right? So I think he was going on that the modernist heretics and inmates of the Vatican, as I call them, had not returned to the faith. We should not be warming up to them. We should not make a deal with them, so to speak. And so he resisted, and he took some priests with him. So that's the SSPX resistance. So they are really, you might say, strict observance SSPX or whatever you want to call them.
Archbishop line SSPX.
Yes, but that's a whole other thing I don't want to get into. But they see themselves as being the faithful followers of Archbishop Lefebvre, holding a hard line against the modernists in Rome, whereas the others are, and I think it's true, are very how would you say, friendly with the modernist inmates of the Vatican. And
Bishop Tissier doing confirmations in a Novus Ordo church.
Yes, in Orlando, Florida, or near Orlando. And yes, many indications of their, in any case, their willingness to do it. You see, they aspire to be all united and to be something like the FSSP, the Fraternity of St. Peter and the Christ the King and all of those others, who are traditional, have the traditional mass, but at the same time are united with the modernists. See, they aspire to that, So there is a significant difference between those two entities. Yes.
Are their masses safe to attend?
They're all unicum still, so I'd say no.
So there's your answer, Mike. Nicholas 2022 $5. Thank you, Nicholas. What is your investigation process of someone who is a Novus Ordo Catholic and was civilly married and divorced if he wants to be received into the RCI Church? I suppose I should just clarify, there's no RCI
There's
Church.
no RCI
But
Church.
if he wants to be...
Received into one of our mass centers where the RCI clergy are
and I
functioning.
suppose then the follow-up question, receiving communion, as opposed to simply someone
So what was the
attending.
case? What was it?
Novus Ordo Catholic, civilly married and divorced.
Well, the civil marriage was an invalid marriage. All right. So that means he's not married. He's free to marry. And now this is without seeing documentation.
Assuming Novus Ordo
I'm-
Catholic, meaning he was purporting to be Catholic, he chose to be civilly married. That
This is off the top of my head. You have to see documentation for all of this stuff before you know, I don't want to give this man a.
Right, Nicholas, if this person is you, please feel free to contact, and we
Yes,
can
you'd
look
have
into it more.
to do a thoroughgoing research on it. This is just the general principles. The civil marriage for Catholics is invalid. So if there's a divorce, that's a civil divorce, he would be free to marry. You see, so his situation is normal. It would not just he would be single. That's all. But he would just have to approach the priest, and we would have to make sure that he knows all the truths of the faith. We'd have to ask him to do a general confession, all of those other things that we do with everybody that comes to us.
So we are into the final 10 minutes of our live stream. So if you'd like to get your questions in, remember, a super chat is the best way to hop to the top of the line and also to contribute to the work of the Institute. We have another one. Well, I'll do a quick one first. Did the seminarians celebrate 12th night? And if so, how? There's only 3 seminarians in residence at the moment because everyone's on vacation.
This place is like a tomb.
And you're grateful for that.
Yes. The only thing that happens is low mass.
His Excellency is catching up on a lot of work, and you have to realize courses are ramping back up. So professors do have a little bit of time to rest, but it's back to teaching courses next week.
Yes.
Contra errores for 5, I'm guessing that's reals. Thank you, Contra errores. Calderon said, I think this is Father Calderon, said that JP2 changed the law of the Pope's election, but if the Pope didn't have authority, the next popes shouldn't even be material popes. And Father Desposito answered, for a conclave to be valid, you only need the electors to elect and the elect to accept. Conclave rules, if broken, don't have a real effect due to the principle of convalidation. Invalidating conclave laws don't invalidate ipso facto. They only give the church a legal means to declare an election invalid. Do you have any further things to add?
No, there could be a convalidation of any kind of election that might be questionable. Convalidation means that the election is commonly accepted.
Another quick question. How does the Institute decide where to assign its seminarians as priests after ordination? For example, would Aidan Gilchrist go to the UK or Michael Hudson to Illinois because they're from there? And I would say Reverend Aidan Gilchrist. Sorry about that.
Reverend Mr. He's not a reverend yet. He's
Reverend
Mr.
Reverend Mr.
Well, it depends. I always say the traditional movement changes every day. So
Changes multiple times a day sometimes.
yes, multiple things happen, and certain doors close, other doors open, and so we just look at the situation where there is need and the qualities of the seminarian, and his nationality and his language, etc., and we make that decision that way. But in principle, we want to send a person back to his native country, not to his native state necessarily, but to his native country. And as a matter of fact, we have the rule that if you're sent out of your native country, you have to consent to it. In other words, we can't send you out of your native country unless you consent to it. See, but that's the ideal. So the French go back to France, the British go back to the UK. We will not put a priest by himself. So if he's the only UK priest we have, I will place him in France, and he will go to the UK frequently and even maybe stay a week there from time to time and do various apostolic activity. So yes, we intend for him to take on, for the most part, the apostolate in the UK.
Does the RCI plan to publish thesis material in French, videos, articles? Je pense on existe déjà. I think Father Duterte is already working on this.
Yes, that's a question for Father Duterte en France, and he's a workhorse, so he probably has it mostly done by now. Yes.
So coming soon.
Yes.
Prochainement.
Yes.
Dominus Deus Rex, another excellent name, Your Excellency.
very nice.
Canadian five Canadian dollars. Thank
Okay.
you. Any comments on the planned episcopal consecration in Canada of Father Waugh and on Canada in general? Any plans to go back?
Well, I don't know Father Roy personally. All right. The only thing is I know is from what I've been told, and this so it's a qualified comment. I've been told that he says Mass una cum petro, and that I think he believes in that there's a pope somewhere or a bishop somewhere. But that's just what I've been told. So I never met him, and I've also heard that he is an opinionist. In other words, that you could go either way on whether he's the pope or not. I've heard that, but I can't vouch for that. I'm not saying that that's what he thinks. That's the only. I mean, I would not consecrate someone who had those ideas. I would say that, but he hasn't asked me to consecrate him. So, as far as Canada, there were two things that killed off Canada for us. One was COVID, the extreme lockdowns that were put in Canada, and so you could hardly move, and we couldn't go in, and so forth. We couldn't. It was just impossible. But then worse than that was Quebec. The government of Quebec, the provincial government of Quebec, made homeschooling for people almost impossible. So much oversight and so many demands of what they have to learn, etc., that our principal families there, the ones that were very supportive in all ways, both by work and by donations, decided they were going to leave Quebec.
They had to flee.
And some said they're going back to France. Others, they're going because they had French spouses. They're going to New Brunswick, where it was not as bad. Others are going to Ontario. It fell apart effectively, And so there were those two factors, one after the other. First the COVID, then the government of Quebec became just unbearable. So return... We will go wherever we're needed and, according to our ability to provide masses. However, if you're talking about French Canada, it has to be la langue française, So I'm the only one that qualifies for that. And but yes, I mean, we would not.
We have a Canadian seminarian in formation now.
Yes, we do. And but I don't think he speaks French.
But I mean, I think the larger question, Canada in general, we could see what happens.
Yes, we are open to any apostolate that we can do and where we're demanded, And I would not. We don't have any hard feelings or bad feelings. It's just those two factors killed it. And so, it was not that we were angry with them or anything like that. It was just it killed it. Those two factors.
We have a $50 super chat from Jackie Sonyara, one of our teachers down at Queen of All Saints. Thank you, Jackie. Hello, and as always, thank you for the Q&A. Jackie, if you have a question that comes to mind in the next couple of minutes, please let us know, and we'll do that. Andrew, from a little earlier, again, one of our super chatters. If a Lutheran converts, is his confirmation all the education he gets? Not entirely certain what he means by that question.
No, we would instruct him with the Catholic Catechism. And he would have to know, as a minimum, what they call the rudiments of the faith, as a minimum. But ordinarily, we do much more than the minimum.
And I would add, Andrew, there has actually never been a time when so much information has been available. You have seminary courses online, there's articles, there's books.
Yes.
His Excellency is doing a Q&A like this. There's lots of opportunities to get a Catholic education if you didn't get a Catholic education. And that's how a lot of seminarians also showed up here as well. They wanted to get a Catholic education.
I would add this, that a lot of the time of priests is spent in instructing converts, a great deal of time.
He's saying, are there adult classes? Yes, Andrew, it just depends on where you are. And for example, in Australia, they have catechism class, I think, weekly. Just depends on your priest and your situation. But potentially, if you are a convert, this is a separate. I know that True Restoration offers a free membership to anyone who's going through adult catechism, if as long as a priest is known to them. So you might reach out to them. You might be eligible for that as well if you still need to fill up your catechetical education that you felt you didn't get. A fairly quick question here, Your Excellency. Do you recognize Bishop Clarence Kelly's episcopal consecration?
I have to say I don't know. That group is so secretive that I really don't know what happened, and I can't find out. So I'm not saying I doubt it. I'm just saying I don't know.
You didn't have a moral imperative to have to find out.
No, the ordination in 1990 went badly. As far as there's four different stories about what happened when it came to the essential words. And so, again, I don't know what to believe there. And, they're not people that are open book and answer questions, legitimate questions. They are very, very isolated and purposely so. They just don't talk to anybody else. And as far as the consecration, I mean, that was even more. That was just a few priests. And I don't know. I really don't know what to think about it.
Okay. Someone has asked a couple times about the destruction of some Coptic churches in Gaza. Destruction of 3 Catholic or Coptic churches in Gaza. Do you have any comment on this?
No, because whenever there's a war, there are always atrocities, and there always are reports of atrocities, and many times the reports of atrocities are not true. But there are always atrocities, so who did it and was it done, etc. I could not possibly comment on that.
All right, we're going into our last couple of minutes. So if you have a super chat that you'd like, if you have a question, please put it in super chat form and we'll be able to get to it. Otherwise, we'll have to save it for our next live stream and Q&A with His Excellency. Let's see. People keep bringing up stories that they don't have any mass to attend when they become sede. Can you elaborate on spiritual communion and its efficacy and historical practices by saints and popes?
Well, St. Alphonsus Liguori was the one that actually created the formula for spiritual communion. And yes, in the absence of the sacrament itself, it is the next best thing. And don't forget that God does not demand the impossible. And you only miss Mass when you have a Mass to miss. And think of people who lived in very remote parts of the world, even in the normal times of the church, in northern Canada or Alaska and all those. They might see the Mass from time to time. And the Japanese who were without the Mass for centuries. And so everything depends ultimately on the grace of God. It is the grace of God that is going to save you. And if you are cut off from the sacraments, which is the normal channel of the grace of God, you can be saved by praying and asking for all of the necessary graces and virtues, etc., whatever you need. And God is not going to spurn you. I mean, there's an old saying in moral theology, no one is obliged to the impossible. In other words, God will not oblige you to the impossible if you can't get to Mass. But if you have a fervent desire to go to Mass and a fervent desire for the Holy Eucharist, which you manifest by the spiritual communion, that is sufficient in God's eyes.
And might I add, Your Excellency, I think it's actually a great consolation these days that we have streaming masses. I know that there's numerous times I've been on the road and I've been able to. I remember I told Father Saavedra that I was in Turkey when I watched one of his streaming masses. That the ability I'm in Turkey on a Sunday and I can attend the traditional Mass, not just in spirit but in actuality. I'm watching the Mass happen as it's happening.
Well, it's not the same thing as being
right. I'm not there.
Present.
I'm not there, but it's wonderful to hear to hear the words being said and to be able to unite myself in a certain way. I'm going to make this the last question. Some Latin courses coming soon. From a French follower who questions himself on a vocation, please pray for me, Monsignor.
All right, I will pray for you. Je prierai pour vous.
Do you have any Father Disposito question maybe. Are we going to have Latin courses? Do you think that might be a bit too hard for the laity?
Yes. It's pretty hard for the seminarians. So Latin is a classical language. It demands a tremendous amount of memorization, and the grammar is difficult.
And this is a seminary question, but I think I just follow up with that, Your Excellency, that one of the things I've noticed is that, there's a story about this young man. He wanted to become a samurai archer. And the first few weeks of his training, he was told, you need to chop wood and carry water. He says, well, I came here to learn how to shoot. He says, that will come in time. For right now, we need wood to stay warm and we need water for us to drink. You need to chop wood and carry water. And I've seen that corollary with the seminarians that, when are we going to talk about theology and when are we going to get into St. Alphonsus? As well, you need to learn Latin first. Yeah. Here are the conjugations, here are the declensions. The first, here's what happens in the first declension, here's what happens in the second declension. Not real exciting theological battles, Your Excellency.
It's horribly boring.
But you've said to me it's a way also to weed out people who are here for the right reasons. Because if you're here for the right reasons, who cares if it's difficult or boring? You're going to get through it.
Yes, language is merely a question of work. It's not a question of intelligence. It's a question of work. If you put in the work, you will get it. If you don't put in the work, no matter how intelligent you are, good or bad, you will not learn it. So even if you're a great intellectual or something like that, if you don't put in the work, you will never get it. It's merely a question of application, study, and memorization. You'll get it. But a lot of people shy away from that because it is difficult.
Well, I think on that note, it's probably appropriate for us to end the stream. Your Excellency, thank you so much for your time. I want to also thank everyone who contributed using a super chat. As I said, that goes to support the Institute, the work of our clergy. Remember that the Institute is the one that takes care of the clergy that goes out into the missions. That's not, properly speaking, the job of the seminary. The Institute priests go out to the missions. Your contributions can help support the Institute in that way, and we thank you for that. And also, as I said, thank you, Your Excellency, for your time answering questions, all over the board kind of questions. And thank you, Father Disposito, for providing invaluable technical support. And thank you all to everyone for your patience as I labored behind a horse and buggy to get here on time.